So could you describe a typical experience a client might encounter coming in to a hypnotherapy session? So basically run through the stages, if you wouldn't mind, so that anyone who's listening to this podcast, or if they're watching this via the magazine, if they're thinking about coming in for a hypnotherapy session, I'd like them to feel comfortable of an understand or have an understanding of what they would be walking into.
Well, that's pretty much every client. Most of my clients are a little bit nervous, a little bit confused, a little bit unsure. It's like the last resort. Hypnotherapy should be the first choice. First choice, straight up. It's
Yeah.
normally the last resort. They're just nothing work. The pharmaceutical drugs don't work. The psychologists don't know what they're doing. Nothing's working for them. They're still feeling whatever they're feeling, and they listen to a video that I've got or read my site, and they go, right, well, let's just give it a go. So what I do is I spend a little bit of time making them feel comfortable. I'll explain the process. I'll explain what I talked about, how we all go in and out of trance all the time, and hypnotic language. And I give them an appreciation of how the system works, and then they're ready. And then what I do is I go through a whole host of checks and balances on where they are, all these subcategories of their health and their behavior, just so I can track how they shift over time, but also to help them give insight about how they're not necessarily treating themselves that well. Because this isn't just about dealing with one particular issue. I look at it as a full personal development package, essentially. And I want my clients to get the most out of the experience the best they can, as well as walk away with tools and whatnot to really face their challenges properly as they arise later on in life. So it's not just about going hypnotherapist doing something to client. It's hypnotherapist and client working together in collaboration to achieve the best possible results and the time that we've got with each other, as well as for them to walk away feeling that they can actually apply some of this sort of hypnotherapeutic or self-administered hypno-psychotherapeutic stuff in their own life, essentially. And then I explain, through this process, I'll explain what the trance might feel like to them. Some people, the experience is much different, is quite different to everybody. There's some similarities, of course, but the depth of trance that people go into will be different. And so I'll frame all that for them. I'll say, look, you might go really well, you might go not so deep, but it's still going to work as long as you sanction me to embed this information into your system. It'll be there, and I'll give you some techniques to reinforce that as you go about the next week into your next session, essentially. So I'm always letting them know it's going to work. It might not be as strong if you don't go as deep into trance, but that's okay. We can work with that. We'll figure this out as we go along, because of essentially hypnotherapeutic susceptibility is just like the bell curve. And the bell curve, for those that don't understand it, is just like it's just a nice average where on one end of the scale or the chart, some people are amazingly good subjects. We call them floppers. I can pretty much just go, right, get ready, your eyes are getting closed, there they go, and gone, and I'll just drop them in and they're gone. It's amazing. Some people are very, very, they're just great visualizers, essentially, and they can tell this new story and engage in the process and switch off. As long as they got the rapport with me and there's some trust there and they feel comfortable and they're good, they'll go, no problem. Some people are very, 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 very difficult to hypnotize and almost impossible. It's only a very small percentage. And I work that out through the process through things called suggestibility tests to work out how sort of responsive a person, an individual might be to these particular techniques. So far, most of my clients by far can go into quite a relaxed state, a nice state of trance. Some people, there's been a few that it's been quite difficult, but again, you just got to work with the circumstances of that person and maybe go a little bit more on the conscious CBT side to begin with, and really start rearranging that to get it into the system that way. It depends on the situation, but ultimately it's just framing it right for the client, so they've got a general idea what to expect, build the trust, build the rapport, go through the process of where they actually are, design a plan of what they truly want, because they might come in with a general idea of what they want, but it's always expanding from there. They might come in with one or two things they want to achieve, and before the first session has even begun, just through talking with me, they'll realize there's like 10 or 15 things that they want. Right, so I encode all that into the suggestion states as well. So yeah, and that's why I always start with the first session. It'll be up to an hour and a half, and then every session after that will just be around the hour mark.
No, I know what you're saying. Usually the initial, do you normally find that the initial complaint that somebody comes in with probably isn't actually the core of the issue at all? It's actually just a symptom, and there's a larger underlying issue.
Yeah, I do a lot of what is called content-free therapy. I don't want to know. I don't need to know. I don't need to know the exact moment that the trauma started, when all the things started stacking on top of each other, because a lot of these pattern interrupts happen, these traumatic, so-called traumatic events. They're not necessarily massively traumatic. It's just a pattern interrupt that started a dysfunctional cycle that's stacked on top of each other. In fact, the birth process is inherently traumatic. You are in a beautiful, nice, comfortable space, connected with your source, getting all the food and sustenance that you need, and then suddenly you're ripped out of it. That is traumatic for a baby right there. A lot of the time, the first trauma a person will experience. But a lot of the neurology of a child is organized, about 80% of it, within the first 2 or 3 years of life, and that includes as a fetus. So anything mum's experiencing is being wired into baby, essentially. So if mum is having a stressed out pregnancy, you're wiring your baby for stress. Plain and simple. There is no way around that. So if you've got to have de-stressing strategies if you're a pregnant mother, because you're already teaching your child how to be overly stressed, have an overactive stress response system. But regardless, it doesn't matter where all of these things start. Some people, they want to go back and regress and find the source, or find some clarity around whatever this event was in their past, and that's fine if they want to do that. But you don't have to do that. You can just go, I want to change the subconscious story. I just want a new automated unconscious response to my environmental stimuli. I just want to behave differently. I just want to be happier. I just want to be healthier. I want to be more anxiety free. I just want to, whatever their goals are. And so we just design the system like that. And that'll just undo everything else from the past. All the old neurology and conceptual arrangement has to adapt to the new dominant pattern that we're creating, essentially. And as we talked about prior to the interview starting, every time we access a memory, it's edited. So just because if you say, let's go back to an old memory, that might not necessarily be the real thing anyway. It might be just some sort of twisted, distorted, delusional account of what actually happened, which is what we find that, I mean, the studies are really clear on that. I was watching something on it just recently, where a major event in the world was, people were studied based on their proximity to the event, as well as right after the fact, and then several years as time goes on, and their memories change all the time. But they were 100% convinced in general that what they were saying was true. So we're always editing this stuff anyway. So you might find some clarity in an experience of a memory of a trauma event or whatnot, and you might feel like, oh, I've got now closure or something. Sure, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with having that. However, just know that that closure might be based on a false memory anyway. So, it's sort of like, I don't see the absolute necessity of going there. I prefer content free. Let's just go, how are we going to move forward? What do you actually want? Let's just create that. That's how I generally, the general approach I take.
Oh, that's good. Good. So, how have you responded to skepticism of hypnotherapy in the past? I mean, as you said earlier, I suppose it's seen as a pseudoscience from the medical industry. It's great that you've been going out and doing presentations to doctors and medical centres and things like that, because the more knowledge out there about hypnotherapy, the better. But I imagine you have hit some skepticism over the years, maybe even when you're doing those presentations. How do you deal with that? 'Cause that's something that everybody hits on a daily basis.
No, if they've got a poor attitude, I'll say, well, you're poorly researched. So, like, go to my website and have a look at the compilation, the studies compiled by the Australian Journal of Counselling. I think it is off the top of my head, but there's a link there under the Science of Hypnosis at my website. And when I went to all the doctors and medical practices, I had that all information there. I was prepared. I said, look, here's a link. If you're not up to date with the clinical research on hypnopsychotherapy and all these other single focus-based states, then you need to be, because this is part of the medical industry. So that's really important, that if you want to be on the cutting edge of your discipline, you need to be aware of this, plain and simple. But yeah, skepticism. Some skepticism is just more neutral, well mannered sort of stuff, and it's like, and I'll explain it. Oh well, this is where it is. This is where we're at. Check out this stuff. The clinical research is amazing, so you have to look into it if you want to actually understand it. Other people are a little bit more rude or arrogant with their skepticism, and I'll just respond by saying, well, you're poorly researched and you don't know what you're talking about. And if you want to evolve your limited understanding in this area, then here's A, B, and C that you can follow to do so. But otherwise, I don't care. I'm not here to change everybody. I'm not here to save the world. I'm here to work with what I was talking about before within my space and do what I possibly can to help assist the ongoing expansion of our collective and my individual experience of consciousness. And it is what it is. And so if people are skeptical, they can be. That's their thing. If it's something to do with my professional experience or personal or whatnot, I'm happy just to give them some information. They either follow up on it or not. But ultimately, you just have to go to the peer-reviewed studies that are in abundance. That's the ultimate answer.
Yeah, I have. I suppose the field that I'm most interested in, I've researched the most, is ufology, and I've had contact experiences, but it's not something that I discuss with anyone that's not also had a contact experience. I learned very early not to discuss. Like I've recorded what occurred during those times for down the track when my memory fades. But it's not something that I would initiate a conversation on with anybody unless they're actually a contactee or an abductee or they've experienced some type of contact with an entity of some type, whichever. It's just the responses from people, or the skepticism, can be quite damaging to a person's psyche. And it's one of the reasons I started my bachelor this year, is so that I can start to produce documentaries which give a voice to people who have had these experiences, but to do it in a very professional way, so that perhaps I can open a few minds, or maybe crack open a little glint somewhere for people. In fact, one of the projects I've just done, I've just finished an advert, my first advert, and I did it on experiencer trauma. And I basically, the first 40 seconds of the ad is a therapy group. I'll send it to you. And again, just keep in mind, though, it's my first attempt at an advert. So it's a learning experience. The first 40 seconds of the ad is a therapy group setting, and basically there's 3 people who've had trauma in some way, and then halfway through the ad I flip it by making people aware that it's actually a therapy group for abductees or paranormal experiences, and then we see them having interactions with like an angelic messenger, an ET, and a kind of a ghost stalker type entity. And I did that, and basically because when I started evaluating all the different types of trauma, I realized that PTSD stretches across abduction as well. It's not just trauma is trauma. It doesn't really matter what the origins of it are. But it's treated so differently by people. Like if somebody has done service and come back with PTSD, they're given a lot of empathy and sympathy and support. However, if somebody's gone through a full abduction experience, they're laughed at and told that it's in their head, or it's so, which is
Well, I mean, as in the medical community, they should be thinking very simply about this, regardless if it is a genuinely real experience or not, like some sort of physical aspect to it or not. Doesn't matter. They've had an experience. They're traumatized. They've got PTSD. That needs to be treated.
but that's not how it is. And
No, I know. It's very sad.
So basically, then that's what I did this ad on. It was to so I'll send you a link to it. It's on my portfolio kind of page, so you can check it out and give me some feedback, which would be great.
Sure.
But that's kind of why I want to get into doing more digital based products. And so my course covers a whole range of things, like how to shoot film, documentaries, how to do fictional products, how to do promotional advertisements, how to do animation, how to write apps. Yeah, so it's quite diverse. So, which is all the different spheres of digital technology and media, which is what I want to get into to a greater deal. And I think the more people like me doing things like this in alternate areas, the more exposure these areas will have, and the more accepted they'll become very quickly. So, back to the question: is there any particular personality type that's particularly resistant or particularly insistent, I suppose, to hypnotherapy? Is it is there a particular? I suppose we could go off the Briggs-Meyer scale, if you know that one, that basically says yes. You know how before you were talking about somebody who goes straight under, and then is there anyone out there that you could actually kind of pinpoint and say, oh, the ENTJs or whatever, they go under within 10 seconds? Oh, Siri's talking to us.
Go ahead.
Yeah. That happens a lot. Big brother. Go away, Siri. Scary stuff.
Well, what I would say about that, I haven't done any testing of that. I've never read any studies on that, so I have no idea. Just I'd go back to the bell curve. Some people are amazing at it. I don't think I've seen
Any correlation?
anything obvious. I haven't seen anything obvious with a type, a specific type of personality type that is consistently able to drop easy into that deep trance, or what is called a somnambulistic state or a cataleptic state. But yeah, it's just I just look at it as the bell curve. I think that we've all got. I think it'd be much deeper if I was to take a stab in the dark. I'd say it's a bit deeper than just the personality stuff. It's energetic expression, it's frequency, sort of attunement that would, I think, play a role with that as well, as well as the personality as well. But I'm speculating here.
I think you're right on the frequency stuff. I've got a couple of Rife machines which I use on a daily basis. You know about Royal Rife and his Rife machine, the frequency generators?
It sounds familiar. You'll have to remind me.
Oh, well, basically they're healing machines. Royal Rife was around, I think, in the 40s and 50s, and he developed this machine which people would sit inside, and their systems would be bombarded with frequencies, healing frequencies. Very similar to, do you remember the Japanese doctor that would throw frequency and sound into water, and he'd create ice crystals?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Basically, you're the crystal. You're the water, basically, because our bodies
Well, we
are
are
85. Was it 85 or 90% water? Anyway,
70
basically,
to 90, depending on how old you are.
yes. So basically, he would sit the whole body inside this machine and then bombard it with healing frequencies. And over a period, I think 5 or 10 years of testing, he cured a range of cancers with it.
Yeah, I do remember this now. Yeah.
Yeah. So but the system, I don't know if they went after him. I really don't know what the story was, but basically he got discredited, the machine got debunked, and then the patent was picked up by the government, strangely enough.
Mhm.
The US government bought out the patent and he died mysteriously, my understanding is, like most inventors do in the US. They seem to have a longer survival rate in Europe. But in the US in particular, if you want to invent something, you seem to, if it's a very good device, you seem to, your patent seems to be end up in the hands of the government over there, especially if it's a petrochemical related or a free energy device. But with this particular device, about 20 years ago, a smaller box was generated, and the code was written in China by a team of coders, and it was came out as called a Spooky 2 machine, and it allowed instead of paying $40,000 or $50,000 for a Reich machine and all the different frequencies to be modulated inside it, and the coding done by the Chinese programmers allowed it to be distributed via just a very small generator. I've got one here, and it's called a Spooky 2. They're only about $400 each. I've got two of them. I have one running off my main computer and one running off my laptop. But you can have them, you can get a hub set up and have it all written. You can have as many as you like. I've seen some setups in people's homes where they've got, it's like a computer cupboard where they've got like 15 generators attached to. It's just amazing. And it works on DNA. So basically you put a clipping or some hair with follicles inside a little box, which and it then you can use it on remote mode. So no matter where you are, you're getting the healing. And the moment the machine goes on, if you're like me, you're a little bit sensitive, you can actually feel the machine working. I've currently got it on detox, which is a 14-day cycle. And I can tell you exactly what it's working on because I can actually feel it in my body. Like
Cool.
today, we're working on liver and kidney, and I can actually feel that area of my body being worked on.
I'd
It's
probably
quite,
need a couple of days of healing on that one.
yes. You would. I'm actually very good. I don't drink. Um, I've never really been a big drinker. It's just when socializing, glass of
Yeah.
champagne.
Well,
Uh,
coming back from the snow with my younger brothers, there was
oh, you
certainly
need
some
now.
mind alteration going on. So,
Well, you really should get into. You should check these machines out. They're very economical, and but they have all these different components. So you can do like a full body scan to find out what's going on in your system, and then you can actually target the frequencies are then targeted whatever the scan found, and basically you just run the scan again and again and again, and then rescan your body every month or so, and you'll find that a lot of the ailments, it's not a quick fix. I've had my machine for 2 years, and in the last 2 years, if I have a migraine, I'll put the frequency on for migraine, and it'll be gone in less than 10 minutes.
what's the machine called again?
It's a Spooky 2. I know it's a weird name. It's because of
Spooky
Spooky
Tube.
2.
I'd imagine that I'd be able to incorporate as an assessment in my hypnotherapeutic practice, and then I could use particular suggestions based on that information to get the body, the subconscious, the immune system, the endocrine system, endocannabinoid system to focus on those particular areas to do the healing that way.
Exactly.
So I could
Yeah.
use that as an assessor and then use my language as a way to do the actual work.
The remote setting works on quantum entanglement, and that's where the whole Einstein referred to that as spooky science. So that's how the name came about.
Spooky action at a distance.
Yeah.
Cool.
So so yeah, you should. Yeah, as I said, I've had my boxes now for about 2 year period, and when like I occasionally get conjunctivitis if I've been burning the midnight oil too long or doing too. I'll probably have a bout after this series of interviews I'm doing actually because I'll be not sleeping as well as I should. And basically, when I run the conjunctivitis program, if that's what the issue is, I will actually have things physically streaming out of my eyes, and it'll be fixed in less than a couple of hours. So it's I've physically seen it working, and I feel it working. Whereas it's not the same for everyone though. I've had other people use it and they never feel anything, but then they'll go to their doctors and they'll have scans and they'll go back 6 months after using it, the device, and the doctor will be absolutely flummoxed at how they've been able, without medication, to remove certain things. And although you can't actually say it's healed them, because that's, you know, you're not allowed to say that anymore, are you? With any of the alternate stuff. But I've actually had physical ailments fixed using it over the last 2-year period. Nothing major, but things like conjunctivitis, migraines, personal things. So yeah, I would recommend it. Anyway, back to this. So do you deal predominantly with phobia-based complaints from your clients, or that's just what I'm imagining people would come to you for? There's some phobia that they need fixed through hypnotherapy, or is that like the main component of your client base, or am I off the mark here?
Well, I would suggest that it's more anxiety, depression, and general well-being. I mean, you could probably classify anxiety as a phobia, fear of some type, if or something a trauma that really got out of hand. So the stress response system is overstimulated, overactivated. There is some obvious fear in there, but no, phobia is not so much compared to anxiety and depression. That's generally the primary focal areas. The majority of my clients have some sort of anxiety or depression. Some people come just for pure personal development. Some people come for uh, presenting without fear, so public speaking, or increasing confidence and performance in that public speaking situation, or whatever it may be, in just communication in general with loved ones or out in the real world, out in the world. No, that's normally some things like misophonia, and there's a whole host of weird, sort of more, I shouldn't say weird, but more unique, rare stuff that has
Yeah.
come in. And again, it's last resort for them. They've tried all these other things, and it hasn't worked, so they come to see me, and it does work. It's ridiculously amazing. I'm still ridiculously surprised all the time when I just sit there and go, "What's your issue? And how do you want to feel? All right, let's just create how you want to feel, and then we just go and create how they want to feel." And I give them the tools to make sure they reinforce that and really cement that in. So that is now the dominant pattern of who they are. And so everything else has to unfold around that. Everything else has to now adapt to the new program that I've just downloaded and installed into their body computer. That's more or less how it works. And
You should
so
definitely get into this spooky too, because even what you're saying there is basically what the spooky two does on a frequency basis. So if you worked in conjunction with it, I think you'd be amazed at your results. I mean, you're probably already getting great results, but I think this might actually we should do a test. You should send me some DNA and I'll pop it in the machine, and we'll see. We'll do a remote test. So anyway, we'll talk about that after we've done the interview.
sure.
So with so if you're the last resort, it must be annoying to you, because you probably find that you could have fixed people a lot quicker if they'd come to you in the initial stages, rather than, confusing what's actually going on with them. Because once you've applied all these different modalities, they must all have like an effect each time a new modality is added, and it's
Well,
to,
the more the old patterns of negativity, whatever it is, the things that are dysfunctional that they've existed, the more dominant and more strong they are within the system. So if somebody come and see me more or less at the start of this journey of becoming anxious or depressed, then it's going to be a simple, quick fix. It's not going to take some. It's really dependent or contingent on the individual. Some sessions I can sort out these issues in 3 or 4 really quickly, and it's just a massive rebirth almost instantly. Some take, well, the most sessions I've had with one particular person was 8 or 9, I think, and that's the longer end. I've heard that the general average with seeing a hypnotherapist is around 12. And I've heard that the general average around seeing a psychotherapist or psychologist is around 40 or 50 or something like that. So at the moment, I'm working under the average of hypnotherapists as well. But again, it really depends on the person. I've got all these techniques that I use that I've drawn upon from a whole host of sources. I've been trained by the Institute of Clinical Hypnotherapy and Psychotherapy, and they're an amazing organisation. But I've drawn from many other sources as well, and got my own unique approach to this whole process. But yeah, annoying. Well, look, that's the madness of the world. The mainstream is well behind the times on many things. So this included. So it makes my job a little bit more difficult, I guess. But the real issue is that I could help so many more people. The problem is there's no Medicare rebates, and the health insurance rebates. It is there, but not to a great extent, and there is no government support for hypnopsychotherapy. So people have to pay money out of their own pocket. That's just how it works. And people are scared if it's going to actually work or not. Are they going to waste the money, so to speak? And ultimately, it comes down to, even if it costs you 1,000 or 2,000, just say over 20 sessions. Like I've never had to go that long. But even if that was the case, wouldn't you want to emancipate yourself from this? Isn't the quality of life going to be much better, even if you have to fork out a little bit of cash for that process, like a small investment in yourself? As I said before, you're your greatest project. We need help with this stuff. I did all this by myself. It was an arduous journey. I don't recommend it. It took me years upon years upon years to get the skills and knowledge, the techniques, and the transformation that I needed to emancipate my suffering to the level of well-being I am right now, and the level of sophistication I am right now. And that's great. I learned a lot through that process, and I'm able to apply that within my clinic professional setting, and also help others to understand it and give them that knowledge. But it was a very, very challenging journey. And so if you can get help, get it. And if it costs you a bit of money, do it. That's my recommendation. If you're committed to yourself, just do it. Suck it up and go for it. But yeah, ultimately, it is about public awareness, understanding that this is a real option that has genuine um, uh, healing, or should I say, therapeutic and developmental benefits. It is
Let's hope,
very.
let's hope Medicare or all of the providers jump on board, because that's exactly correct. I mean, a lot of people won't go there unless there's some type of rebate, sadly. I know I did the same thing with, I used to get a massage all the time, and then they cut it out of the rebate package. And so then it became more of a treat rather than something I was doing on a regular basis, which is a shame. So when you are doing a session, have you ever had a past life just pop up? And if that's been the case, how did you deal with that? I mean, it must have been quite disorienting to suddenly be talking or not talking. Well, yeah, I suppose you do talk. I've done a couple of regression therapies. I've never had a hypno session, but I imagine they're similar. And there is a level of confirmation feedback from the client back to the therapist. Is that the same with hypnotherapy, or are you just talking the whole time?
It depends. I have different techniques for different people, and I've got a standard approach that I take, but I'll adapt according to the circumstances. Uh, yes and no. As we spoke beforehand, before the interview started, there is an editing process going on when it comes to any memory. And so, and as much as people believe this memory is 100% true, it is most certainly not. Most of our memories are most certainly not 100% true. They might have snippets of truth, but contextually they might be well out of attunement with the more ultimate levels of truth. If something's popping up from a past, as I mentioned before, it could be a pure representation of some aspect of self that literally lived that life. Sure, it could also be symbolic for information that they need in that moment to utilize to go through the next level of their healing development and growth, healing, learning, and growth. And so, whether or not it is a past life or not, that it's up to them to decide. It's not me, up to me to decide. That's their philosophy, their metaphysics, their sophistication of understanding themselves and how that information fits into the context of who they are. So I can't say yes or no. What I can say is people do have certain things pop up at various stages, and I will work with them according to what they want. But as I said before as well, I do a lot of the more forward thinking process. It's not about going back into the past in general. For me, it's going forward. And I think that's why I've been able to produce quick results in an efficient way, because I don't see an absolute need to explore the basis of these dysfunctions and traumas to a huge degree. If they want clarity or clarification or resolution, that's fine. But if you just want to feel in a particular way, then let's just do that.
Mm. That's quite the reverse of what a psychiatrist or a psychologist might approach it as. And I've often thought that type of therapy, sitting on a couch or whatever, was a little bit of it didn't appeal to me. Let's just say that.
But look, some of the greatest therapeutic interventions I've had with my clients are the psychotherapy side of things. It is very important that I'll sit there. Some of the greatest transformations for the entire client was primarily the psychotherapy, not the hypnotherapy. It was reframing how they think about a particular past circumstance. I spent a lot of time helping people to reframe how they think, to recontextualize how they feel about something that may have happened to them in their past. That is super important. Where, as I said before, this is generally how I do it. It's like, yeah, that was bad. That's really bad that happened to you. But ultimately, you're self-harming yourself more than the original event. You're hurting yourself more than what this particular person that you hate and feel all this anger towards, you're doing it worse to yourself because you've perpetuated it for all these years. You're the one that's maintained that hatred and anger and sickness within yourself, not them. They did the original thing, you did the rest of it. And so that's where the re-empowerment comes in. That's where taking responsibility for yourself comes back in. That's where controlling that which you can control comes back in, which is your response to your environment. So if you don't want to think, feel, and behave in particular ways, you don't have to. You just have to spend some time working out how to change that. And so that whole process, that's the psychotherapeutic process. And that's the conscious mind coming to grips with, yeah, okay, that sucked. And we don't have to change the fact that that sucked, but we can change the way that if you're going to treat yourself from now on after that fact. Because if you want to let that define you, you can, but by letting yourself by defining yourself that way, you're only causing more self-harm. And so
it's a toxic cycle. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. I know exactly what you're saying. I have had friends and I've had family members that, after 30 years are still talking about an event that happened, in their mid-teens or something, and they've never dealt with it. But
well, the victim mentality is very widespread. It permeates a whole lot of society. People playing the victim and they're blaming everything else besides themselves for how they feel. And whilst these trigger events, they're bad and all the rest of it, there's the validation process that needs to go through. Absolutely, people shouldn't be harming people. I get it. But ultimately, you shouldn't be harming yourself as well. When you're ready to not harm yourself, I'm happy to help you move forward, essentially.
No, thoroughly agree. So how has being a hypnotherapist or hypno-psychotherapist changed your life? I mean, has it affected your friend base? I imagine it would have, to be honest.
Yes and no. It hasn't changed my life. I can just help people faster. Like I've been helping people for so long, but this having been trained in this area and like on a whole host of deep levels, I'm now more efficient at the process of helping people to emancipate themselves from their suffering. That's the biggest thing. How's it changed my life? I guess I use different I use my language differently. I've slightly evolved my language to suit just the general public. So I'm always using hypnotic language consciously, more so than what I used to be. But no, there hasn't been a big dramatic shift because I was already sort of this. I was already sort of that. Now I've just got a few tools and techniques stacked on top of what I already was. So I've evolved in particular ways, but I still feel the same. I've still got, I still attract. I've always attracted authentic people into my life as my good friends. So that hasn't changed. It's obviously been amplified, if anything. And yeah, no, I can't see too much except for just the efficiency of actually helping people, and I absolutely love it. I love my job, and I love telling people what to do as well, Sharon. It's part of my energetic makeup. And so now I've got an excuse to. So now any client that I have is resistant to what I'm telling them to do, is only resistant to themselves, because I've actually said to you, what do you want? All right, are you ready just to surrender now? You surrender to me telling your body that this is what you are. And if they're resistant to that, then they're only resistant to their own goals and objectives, which obviously they're not going to do. So therefore, that's why it works so well. I just tell their body what to do, because they consciously told me with a psychoanalysis process of, are you sure you really want this, or can we expand what you want in this particular way? And we really get the plan of what you want, and then just be quiet, surrender, let go. Don't try and control the situation. Just distract your conscious mind and let me help you to truly embody this new information. And so it's just an amazing experience, and I love doing it.
You're lucky if your friend base hasn't been affected. I find I have a core group of good friends, which I've had for like 20 plus years, but I find I have lots of transient people come into my life, and I seem to do something that helps them, and then they're gone. So again, that might be more mission based than anything. But I find I can't. With a lot of people, the moment they start to show any toxic kind of negativity, I run for the hills, which is probably a bad reflection on me, I suppose. But yeah, I have a very I used to, when I was younger, be very empathic, and I'd listen, but I actually got quite ill doing it that way. My health suffered because of it. So in these last 10, 15 years, I've started to say no a lot more, or back away, or not take on the energy of that person, and so yeah, you're very fortunate if that, yeah, you obviously had that built in, which is great. So how does hypnotherapy fit in the wider context of medicine? How does it compare to like traditional therapy techniques, like we were discussing before, lying on a couch and just talking it out? It obviously, you've inferred that your methodology is probably faster at working with the 12 sessions rather than say a 40, which is typical. What other benefits are there to, and how does it, like we've also discussed a little bit about how the medical community are a bit slow on the uptake with hypnotherapy, but it is actually now, it's got a foothold, hasn't it? It's actually in there, and I reckon in the next 10 to 15 years it will be as commonplace as well, psychiatric advice, I suppose. Do you agree, or?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping shorter than that, 5 or 10 years would be better. It's complementary. It's complementary to CBT, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. It is complementary to that. That's what I do. I do the psychotherapy and the hypnotherapy sort of things together in conjunction. A very, very powerful intervention technique, therapeutically and developmentally. Stage hypnosis pushed it back a little bit over the years, because people just did not believe that it was real. Like, they're literally people up on stage, they go into a somnambulistic state. They're chosen specifically based on their suggestibility, susceptibility, and that's never seen with the videos. People just see random people up on stage clapping like chickens. They think it's not real, so therefore they just think that the whole thing of hypnotherapy isn't real. Um, uh, complementary to everything, to natural medicines, to allopathic medicine. There is some good stuff out of allopathic medicine, of course, but your herbs and your plants and all of the natural medicines of of Mother Nature are super important. It's complementary to that. Obviously, the endocannabinoid system and its absorption of the cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, that is a very powerful technique to coming into some proper harmonization functionality within the physical body. However, hypnotherapy can do that sort of stuff. In some cases, you can literally provide the suggestion to the subconscious that you are now going to develop whatever you need to chemically and hormonally, etc., to have this particular state, these feelings, these thoughts. This is how this person wants to feel. So you need to organize yourself within your body, which you naturally how to do, to actually help the experience of, your ego, which is the client. Their experiences, they want this, so you need to organize yourself to do that. Now, that is not always going to be extremely effective and potent. Sometimes it'll work really well, sometimes it won't be. That might be to do with the level of trance they get into. It might be the fact that they don't have the ingredients in the system to create that. So that's where you might need to add some physical ingredients, such as cannabinoids or whatever it is, whatever natural herbs or whatever it is, or allopathic medicines, etc. So every client is different. Every condition has a unique response. Hypnopsychotherapy is a foundational intervention technique that needs to be incorporated throughout the entire health and medical community. Absolutely, there's absolutely no way. It is complementary to all these other things, but those things are also complementary to it. It needs to be part of the foundation. This marrying between CBT and hypnotherapy is integral to really moving forward. And then, of course, all this sound-based healing, and there's a whole host of beautiful alternative therapies out there. And we just need to work out what's required for each individual client to help them experience what they want to experience. So, yeah, very powerful stuff.
So what's been the most enlightening discovery you've made about the power of hypnosis?
Not sure.
I suppose we're looking
Sorry?
for something that I suppose I'm looking for something that after you finished your study that just occurred during treatment of somebody and you weren't expecting something that it was, wow, that's okay, what a wonderful benefit or side benefit to it.
I don't know. I struggle to have favorites at all. I don't have favorite colors or favorite movies or anything, that sort of thing. Um, I think the whole thing is just amazingly beautiful. It's a beautiful art. I guess that's probably it. It's the art of delivery of the technique. And so I was unsure. I didn't know how I was going to go with it. I know I can bloody yap on every now and again. So I thought, well, maybe I'm going to be okay at it. But I just started doing it, and it just worked, and it worked well. And then I started finding my own unique way of expressing it and going with it, and just sort of realized it was an art during the process. There's definitely some real mechanics to it, absolutely. But there's this artistic expression of the mechanics. So, and just really, the art is in not the way that you have unique expression of those mechanics, but the way that you adapt that your unique expression of those mechanics to each individual client. So there's definitely some art involved in it. I guess that would be, yeah, which is sort of the most profound aspect of how I need to deliver my service.
It's nice, isn't it, when you discover you have an affinity with something or a skill at it without that you didn't realize previously you had. That's always a nice bonus. It kind of gives you that confirmation too that you're on the right path of what you're doing. Yeah. So out of how many years have you been doing the hypnopsychotherapy now?
So as an actual clinic, I've only been doing it for about a year, practicing self-hypnosis for more or less 17, 18 years. Not that I knew it was that long. It was only probably 10 years ago I started to really get all that aspect. But my general therapeutic intervention, I've been doing for, well, I mean, on a personal level, years, decades, but on a professional level, about a decade. And I'd already been using some of these techniques that I wasn't aware of in those sorts of settings as well before I was even trained in it. So yeah, about a year, my clinic's been properly, fully operating, and just phenomenal. The whole process has just been amazing.
Is the course a long course? Is it a couple of years, or is it something that you can? Is it more supplementary to past learning?
Because I was trained in philosophy, sociology, psychology at the University of Newcastle in Australia, and Manchester University in England, as well as all of my other training, a whole host of stuff over the years, I was well positioned for that next level of evolution, which is hypnotherapy. The training itself, it depends on where you get it through. With ICHP, it's very robust. Hundreds of hours. It's a big effort, and you can continue. You go through many levels of that as well if you wanted to. But there's some places where you can get it really quickly. So it's quite unregulated in Australia. So again, just because somebody's got a certification in hypnotherapy doesn't mean they're any good at it. But just as people have gone through 8 years of university to get their doctorate of psychology or whatever it is, doesn't mean you should trust them either as a good practitioner. So it's really about the individual and their capacity to understand themselves, understand the context of the discipline, and whether or not they're well skilled and knowledgeable and experienced at delivering those sorts of interventions.
So over the past year, is there any has there been a client who's transformed through this methodology that you'd like to discuss? Not name, of course, but that you're quite proud of.
Well, the first one that comes to mind is a client who was over 60, who had significant years of sexual assault, rape by a family member, and also had several accidents where quite a few people were killed. And so lots of PTSD, lots of trauma, like been on drugs for decades, like pharmaceutical drugs, hadn't helped. And after 5 sessions, he was healed.
Wow.
The sixth session was to help him get off the actual pharmaceutical. Well, in collaboration, I don't recommend it when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs. That's the doctor's problem and the client's problem. I can't provide any advice on all of that. If they feel like it's not doing them good, then they need to go speak to their doctor. I would recommend they speak to their doctor if that's what they want to do. But over that, because he was highly suggestible, or pretty well. It was at the the higher end of the bell curve, the positive end. Just worked phenomenally, amazing, and it was just bang, bang, bang. See, that's gone, shifted that way, feel that way, and it was just a massive rebirth in a very, very short amount of time. That's obviously not going to work with everybody.
Yeah.
It was, some other people might take double the amount of sessions to achieve that. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. Maybe there's some that could do it even shorter. It really depended on the individual. But that was one of the greatest transformations and rebirths I saw in such a short amount of time, given the massive I'm not even sure if this is a word, ingrainment of all that trauma and dysfunction to the system for so long. Just to see that shift so dramatically, so quickly, that was probably one of my greatest moments of helping somebody.
Oh, that sounds great. And finally, what's the best thing about being a professional hypno-psychotherapist?
Um, well, it's a modality that works, and it works well, and it works fast. So to me, that's, I'm in this space because I want to help people. So if I've got a technique that is working well and quickly, then I'm doing my job to the best of my potential. So helping people to transform dramatically and quickly, um, in the context of a very, very sick society where all of these things aren't really working, even if we get even some alternative therapies and whatnot, they can be great physiologically or psychologically in their own way, but it's not a holistic package. So I love the idea of the hypnopsychotherapy being more or less a holistic package, especially when the physical things can be incorporated into it, such as plant-based medicines as well. It's just, yeah, it's a phenomenal intervention, and I'm just so proud to be a part of it. And I've got so much more learning to go through it as well. It's a never-ending journey, as mentioned before. It's going to keep going and going and going. And I'm just sort of, yeah, kicking back and enjoying the process, and helping change lives at the same time.
That sounds great. Okay. Do you have any questions, or we might wrap up?
Yeah, I just thought I may as well mention my websites and stuff like that. So
Yes.
healbyhypnosis.com is, if anybody's interested. I do both online sessions as well as in my clinic, which is currently in Coffs Harbour. I'm not sure when this is going to be aired, but I'm actually going to be moving my clinic to the Bellingen area, which is not far from Coffs, within the next few weeks. And I will be incorporating in some hemp related products, both on a resource level. My partner and I were going to actually be opening up a store that has hemp and eco related products, both on a
Will that be an
medicinal.
online store, or will it be a physical store?
Yeah, well, so far, it depends. I'm not. The website isn't live yet, but it will be belligenhempandco.com.au. That will be the handle. So I'll give you a link to that if people are interested in checking out that. There'll be lots of products there. There is, yeah, so we'll be looking at oils, um, uh, skincare, clothing, farming type products, biodegradable type stuff, hemp based, but also anything that's going to be good for the environment, and shifting in a way where we're removing the toxicity both internally and externally from our world, and actually working in a way that's healthy and happy and honourable and heroic for how we should move forward.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to say thank you for your time today, and keep doing what you're doing.
My absolute pleasure. I appreciate it. Great questions, great chat, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you, Phil.